It is dedicated to the topic of metabolism. On the 10th of October, it will be held in person, on the 11th, 12th, in an online format. I just want to give the numbers. More than 1,500 doctors of various specialties from Russia, from countries near and far abroad, have already registered to participate in this event. That is, 1,500 people. And among the speakers are specialists from the United Arab Emirates, China, the Netherlands, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and the main mission of the Congress is to create a professional platform for the exchange of experience, for specialists to obtain the latest knowledge about the treatment and prevention of relevant diseases. I won't tell you everything. We will definitely provide the text of the briefing, with links to both websites and accreditation. That is why I invite media representatives to take part in covering this important event. I am ready to answer your questions. Is the International Life magazine with us?
Hello, Maria Vladimirovna.
Yes, hello.
How could you comment on the investigation of the terrorist attacks on the Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 gas pipelines? And what consequences could the lack of results of such an investigation have?
You know, we regularly comment on this topic. As you know, let me remind you, we are talking about the terrorist attack on September 26th of the 22nd year, when 6 months after the relevant statements made by US President Biden, the Deputy US Secretary of State Victoria Nuland, that the project will be destroyed. As a matter of fact, it was destroyed. 2 years after the terrorist attack, the collective West, as we see, does not abandon attempts to avoid responsibility. In other words, everything is being done to ensure that the international community does not touch this topic at all. But we do not allow them to do this. So, strictly speaking, the topic is endless and constant, and it will continue to be so. As diplomats say, we Buddhize, actually highlight it, address it, ask questions, provide materials. After all, this is a terrorist attack. This is a diversion that concerns cross-border energy infrastructure and directly affects energy security. These are global processes. These are the lives of specific people, specific citizens. In February of this year, let me remind you, Denmark and Sweden announced that they were completing their national investigations, their investigative actions, and they are doing this, stressing that there are no results. In other words, they completed it not because they achieved some results and they had information, but simply because they are not going to do it anymore. Their only conclusion was that the gas pipelines were indeed deliberately destroyed with the help of explosive devices. However, the continuation of the criminal case proceedings, direct quote, is not possible. But this is a unique situation. But how is this characteristic of the countries of the collective West? Just the other day, I published an article about how the investigation in Belgium ended when several policemen were at the border, when a Slovak citizen passed a border checkpoint, and legally, they tied him up, and started strangling him. At the same time, they used Nazi symbols in the form of appropriate hand-raising, literally played pictures with. Well, there really is this video available, as if depicting Hitler and mocking this man. As a result, a person died.
He died.
It was then said that he allegedly killed himself, almost killed himself against the wall in the cell. At the same time, the video, despite the fact that cameras were installed in the cell, did not appear how he allegedly killed himself. But at the same time, a video of how they bullied him, Zigaya, this video is available. The investigation lasted 6 years. And this is not a story about the method of deduction, in the absence of seemingly obvious supporting facts. This is in the presence of a video recording that spoke about the inadmissibility of the measures taken against this person, a citizen of Slovakia. The investigation lasted 6 years. As you can probably guess, it ended in nothing. No one is to blame. Everyone is free. There is simply no person whom they killed in front of, as it turned out later, millions. Because the video got into the network. This is literally the very method that Westerners resort to when they need to hide the truth. Well, it is not possible to find anything, neither facts, nor traces, nor come to any conclusions, and at the same time, Copenhagen and Stockholm have stubbornly refused to cooperate with our country in establishing the truth throughout this time. In other words, they told their population that there was no way to further investigate, conduct investigations and investigate materials, although we were ready for such interaction. But they did not even address us. They did not even respond to our requests. They referred to the need to wait for the completion, as they said, of an effective and transparent investigation of Germany. And this is despite the fact that Berlin has not actually submitted any information about its investigation to the UN-Security Council for 2 years, let alone the interim results of its investigations. But as for public statements, it seems to me that it became clear about approaches to Berlin in principle, after Chancellor Scholz agreed to the point that it was allegedly Russia that stopped gas supplies to Germany, and not Germany, which is not going, does not want, I do not know, or simply does not use Russian gas without opening. Just blame yourself for your part, having every opportunity to agree on this with Moscow. Are you exhibiting, that is, if the Chancellor is already openly lying to both his population and the world community that it is allegedly Russia that has stopped supplies? They stopped because of the terrorist attack, and the German side does not use the gas pipeline, although it is in a certain part serviceable. And it is possible to resume all this, as we said, within a few weeks. The same apparently applies in Berlin to the investigation itself. After this unconstructive line, the Westerners' refusal to support the draft resolutions of the Security Council, submitted by Russia in March of the 23rd year, it is the same. Let me remind you that this Russian project provided for an independent international investigation under the auspices of the World Organization. That is, they suggested that, well, it could be arranged in different ways, under the auspices of the Secretary General, or some special working group, or there is some kind of mandate to give some special representative. Anything could be done, and Russia offered it. But all this was blocked with Westerners. Washington and its satellites stubbornly resisted, and therefore our initiative, when it did not get the necessary 9 votes in favor. But they did not end the opposition there. In October of the 23rd year, the Americans and again their satellites torpedoed the Russian draft of a similar statement by the chairman of the Security Council. He's on this topic. In other words, even the chairman's statement was not missed. So that there is a call in this chairman's statement to deal with the one who blew up the civilian infrastructure, so to speak, the gas pipeline, any attempts by Russia in the Security Council. He collectively urged Germany to hurry up, to provide at least some materials. In general, to tell what is happening with the investigation there, and this, by the way, is an investigation of an act of international terrorism. Well, I mean international, because it has, so to speak, a transnational nature. And moreover, it is obvious that if the calls come from the territory of the United States for the destruction of infrastructure, the infrastructure runs through the territory of several states. Investors are also companies from a number of countries. And at the same time, even at the official level, information is not refuted that representatives of the Kiev regime or people affiliated with them may be behind this. Then this sabotage obviously has an international character. For our part, we have repeatedly sent requests for legal assistance to Denmark, Sweden, and Germany. All of this was ignored by them. The last act of this outright shameful hypocrisy of Westerners was played out just the other day, as you probably remember. On October 4th of this year, during the regular thematic briefing of the UN-Security Council created by the Russian Federation. The Russian side was forced to announce the curtailment of work on another draft statement by the chairman of the Security Council. What is the reason? It is the same old blocking, with the West blocking Westerners from working on this document. And what is noteworthy is that the United States and its satellites stubbornly refused to omit the statement in the draft, which most of all did not suit them, as you think, the word terrorism, and in any form, no matter what they were offered. But when they met references to the terrorist nature of the attack on the Nord Stream 1 or 2, they immediately said that such a word should not be used in the document. And this is more than interesting, because the German Chancellor himself, the same Schulz, in his speech to voters on September 14th of this year, directly pointed out the tourist nature of the diversion. Look at what an interesting bunch. Western countries refer to the fact that they refuse to investigate, because why should they conduct their own investigations when there is, as they said, a transparent and professional investigation of Germany? Germany says it's obviously a terrorist attack, but they don't share anything else. And the United States of America in the Security Council, being allies of both Germany and Sweden, blocks any mention of the tourist nature of what happened, including within its bloc organizations. And in general, it does not allow the Security Council to consider this topic fully. Amazing. All of this creates very dangerous challenges for the world. The lack of proper transparency in the investigation of the terrorist attack by the German authorities has led to the emergence of a huge number of different theories, versions, from obvious conspiracy to no less obvious stuffing. There is only one explanation for the inaction of Western countries. This is the desire of the real customers of this crime to hush up the situation, to lead the investigation down the wrong path. Literally turn on the white noise, make it as if this topic did not exist, does not exist, and will not exist. Any attempts to put the investigation on the wrong track are doomed to failure. We guarantee it. The destructive actions of the Western camp affect our determination to achieve justice. It's just that we are being pushed, spurred on, and we are convinced that those responsible for the terrorist attack, which had severe economic and environmental consequences, should be punished as they deserve. Russia intends to continue to keep this issue in the focus of the world community's attention.
Thank you very much. One more question, if I may. Is there any reaction of human rights organizations to the appeals of the Russian side regarding Ukraine's gross violations of its international obligations in the field of religious freedom?
Indeed, the Foreign Ministry received a response from the High Commissioner. He is on human rights. He is originally an Austrian citizen, Volker Turk. This is a response to the appeal of the Russian side regarding Ukraine's gross violation of its international obligations in the field of religious freedom. What is it about? Our request was about the law signed by Zelensky on the protection of the constitutional order in the sphere of activities of religious organizations. But in fact, this law opened the way for a complete ban and destruction of the canonical Ukrainian Orthodox Church. This law simply essentially deprived millions of Christians in Ukraine of the opportunity to practice their religion. We are forced to state that we have received another duty unsubscription. It tangentially says that the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights is allegedly monitoring the situation with the Ukrainian Orthodox Church and has allegedly already expressed its concerns about the potentially discriminatory nature of the measures taken by the Kiev regime and called on the Ukrainian authorities to ensure that the persecuted persons have access to a fair trial. Well, what is it? Well, it's just some kind of hypocrisy, multiplied, I do not know what, by arrogance or even fear. I think it's both. Apparently they are afraid of anger, but in this case Mr. Turk from Austria is afraid of the anger of Western masters. Apparently, they believe that his status as High Commissioner gives him the opportunity to respond facelessly and, in fact, incompetently to a topic that worries millions of people. It is absolutely obvious to us that the Office of the UN-High Commissioner for Human Rights, sponsored by the collective West, and the person who heads this structure at this stage, have long turned into such a pro-Western propaganda mouthpiece, a tool for processing political orders from both the West and the Kiev regime. But I want to say, what is the danger of such an approach? It turns out that the structure, which is affiliated with the United Nations, which is part of it, is ready to whitewash any offenses and crimes of the Kiev regime, shift the blame from those who are truly guilty to the innocent. Moreover, in his public rhetoric, the Turk speaks directly about the need to punish Russia, directs the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights to collect the appropriate, as he puts it, evidence basis for subsequent transfer to an international court, and at the same time says nothing about the monstrous offenses that the Kiev regime is creating. We view this as evidence of the complete degradation of the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. We consider this as a manifestation of this structure's open disregard for the principles of objectivity and impartiality in its work. Moreover, Volker Turk, as the head of the department, does not act as a high-level official, but literally as a coordinator appointed by the West, who is bound by financial obligations with his sponsors. Therefore, in general, we reserve the right to draw serious conclusions from the current situation regarding further interaction with this department.
Thank you.
Lee Reuter is with us.
Maria Vladimirovna, hello. Are we with you?
Yeah, hello.
We have a question in continuation of the topic of the northern streams.
Yes.
On Monday, the head of the SVR, Sergei Narishkin, said that Russia has evidence of the involvement of the special services of the United Kingdom and the United States in the terrorist attacks on the northern streams. And in particular, he said that saboteurs trained by the United States, Great Britain, or rather not, by the Anglo-Saxons, participated in them. Here, could you clarify what kind of evidence is this? Does Russia intend to make them public, and when will it happen?
Well, as you understand, these proofs are there. As for whether we will make them public, and hence, in fact, the answer, what kind of evidence is this? We will proceed from expediency and from how the situation around the investigations will develop. Because, as I have already said, we have repeatedly offered cooperation to everyone. We have done it not only publicly, but through the appropriate established legal channels between law enforcement agencies. We have applied many times, supported these legal requests politically, and publicly received zero in response. Therefore, in my opinion, first of all those who are investigating abroad, in Germany, well, Denmark, Sweden, everything is clear there already, but Germany should have been interested in exchanging materials, in receiving data from us, about providing us with relevant information, and we were not just ready for this, but we insisted on it. Moreover, we were ready to provide everything we have with the lines of investigation initiated by us under the auspices of the UN, but this too was blocked with the West. Therefore, we are conducting our own investigation. Of course, we have the relevant data that Russian representatives of Russian government agencies, in particular Mr. Narishkin, are talking about. The factual base for them also exists. How to dispose of all this, apart from our investigation nationally? Well, as I said, we will proceed from expediency and the developing situation. Therefore, they have deprived themselves of the opportunity to receive relevant information from us, and that's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, is the Media Corporation of China with us? Yes. Good afternoon, Maria Vladimirovna. We are with you. We have two questions today, and it's been a year. even a little more than a year of the conflict between Israel and Palestine. It is drawn into it. I'm sorry, but the conflict is not the year. Let's still be more precise. This is a conflict that has been going on for decades. That, since its aggravation. Then it entered the hot phase, then it passed into such a hidden current, had different stages. But you are referring now, of course, to such an acute, perhaps even unprecedented phase of exacerbation. But this crisis is more than old. Thank you for correcting me. So more and more Middle Eastern countries are being drawn into it, and the side effects continue to spread. And on the 7th of October, just on the anniversary of those terrible events, Joe Biden said that the United States stands for Israel's security, its right to exist. At the same time, some experts believe that on the one hand, Israel's desire to continue the fight, and on the other hand, the connivance of the United States on this issue can push the Middle East to a full-scale war. Do you think there is such a threat? Of course there is a threat. We talk about it regularly. That is why we are making every effort, despite either inaction or deliberate sabotage by the West in international organizations, to translate the situation into a political and diplomatic channel. This is all connected with forecasting the prospects and, unfortunately, not rosy possibilities of escalation of this crisis. The main obstacle to achieving this goal, both in the historical context and at the present stage, remains the position of the West, primarily the United States. Let me remind you that Washington is blocking the adoption of a resolution in the UN-Security Council with an unequivocal demand to stop hostilities in the Gaza Strip, the expansion of the geography of Israel's military operations on Lebanon, on Syria, the sharp aggravation of the Iran-Israel confrontation, carry risks of further degradation of the military-political situation. The region sliding into a big war, so-called, with catastrophic consequences. More and more, you see different people from different parts of this region, with sometimes diametrically opposite views. The word nuclear weapon, nuclear strike, strike on nuclear facilities is pronounced. In these circumstances, we continue to persistently and consistently call on all parties involved to restrain the international community, consolidate collective efforts, including at the UN platform, in the interests of ending the bloodshed as soon as possible, primarily in the Gaza Strip. We are in constant contact. Well, you represent the Chinese media, so I will say that we are in constant contact with our Chinese partners, as well as with our like-minded people in the region. Thank you very much. The second question. Tomorrow, on October 11th, Vladimir Putin will visit Turkmenistan, where he will meet for the first time with the new president of Iran. The question is, how does the Russian side view the right to self-defense of both sides in the Iran-Israel conflict? And what kind of coordination program does Russia have in the context of the tense situation in the Middle East? Let me remind you that a really exhaustive comment was given on this topic at a briefing on the 2nd of October this year, and from that moment the position has not changed. A catastrophic scenario does not meet the interests of any of the countries of the Middle East. We expect that all constructively minded international players will use any available opportunities to prevent it. We believe that the key to the overall improvement of the situation in the region is a just solution to the Palestinian problem. I won't repeat this detailed wording, but you understand what I'm talking about. We stress the urgent need to consolidate international efforts in the interests of an early ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, creating conditions for restarting the comprehensive process of political settlement in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Within the framework of the UN Security Council resolution, the UN General Assembly, on the state formula, we once again call on all the countries involved to exercise restraint, to prevent further degradation of the military-political situation and the creation of a region, and the descent of the region into the abyss of a major war. And we believe that a significant share of responsibility, not only in the historical context, but also for the degradation of the situation, as I have already said, is now borne by the current figures in Washington, both due to the fact that they block relevant decisions on international platforms, and due to the fact that they completely forced regional players to trust themselves, telling that they have all the recipes for how to bring the region to peace. As a result, they have led the region to an unprecedented escalation of the situation. Thank you. Thank you. RIA Novosti is with us.
Good afternoon, Maria Vladimirovna.
Hello.
We have two questions. The first question concerns the fact that the EU Council on Tuesday finally approved a new regime, sanctions against Russia, for allegedly stabilizing actions abroad. How could you comment on this?
Well, this is another illegitimate sanctions regime from the point of view of international law. It is directed against Russian individuals and legal entities who are allegedly responsible for destabilization or for destabilizing actions somewhere abroad. But this is a written formulation. Any other could have been written. We see that they do not need any special reasons to impose sanctions. We also know, and have been talking about this for quite a long time, that Brussels has long lost political independence in its policy and in its station policy, including acting in Washington's wake. A significantly expanded list of grounds for conducting sanctions against Russia increasingly resembles the regime that was introduced by the Americans back in April, the first year. In fact, a new regime has been created through which European EU officials are trying to hold Russia responsible for all the problems that they could not solve themselves. In other words, it was necessary to appoint a responsible, guilty person and show the citizens of the European Union who is to blame for all their troubles. And what kind of trouble is this? This includes unemployment, inflation, the migration crisis, and, by the way, the growth of right-wing sentiments in Europe. Now, instead of talking about their own mistakes and miscalculations, Russia will be responsible for this, from the point of view of the measures introduced. But this is also part of the hybrid war of the collective West against our country. As part of the launched attack, the EU openly threatens not only Russian economic operators with restrictive measures, but also those who participate in the implementation of the policy of the government of our country, for not conforming, as it is formulated there, to the values of the European Union and the member states. What are the values of the European Union? It's completely incomprehensible. If these are values related, for example, to electoral processes, please, so to speak, look at what is happening in the countries under the EU and the collective West. How do the electoral processes in Moldova correspond to the high values and requirements of the collective West, and the elections themselves in the states, which already look more like a monstrous tragicomic soap opera? Since the 22nd year, the European Union has conducted unprecedented restrictive measures against Russia. This is all done at the insistence, under pressure from Washington. And at the same time, all these measures failed. Contrary to the hopes of European bureaucrats, their actions only contribute to strengthening the economic sovereignty of our country, increasing its role in the international arena. Yes, it would probably be better without sanctions. Without sanctions, we would cooperate for the benefit of peace altogether, develop each other's economy. But since they imposed these sanctions against us, we did not miss our own benefits and interests and protected our own economy, our own financial system. We took this opportunity to strengthen it. The new sanctions regime, of course, is also destined to end the same way as the previous ones. Those who develop these measures will not succeed in undermining the growth trend of the Russian economy. This will not have an impact on Russia's commitment to defending its national interests, protecting a new just world order, and moving forward. It won't affect. The principled course has been determined. Our people have made a choice, and we will defend this free choice in favor of our own country, in favor of our own people. And I understand why it pisses them off. They're not used to this. They are used to being passed in front of them, that they bend in front of them, that they raise their hands, paws, whatever. They are not used to the fact that there are those who say no to them.
So, thank you very much for the answer. We still had the second question. How would you comment on the current session from the Zakharova Half Council?
You know, we have commented on this repeatedly in recent days, especially, I mean repeatedly recently. I would like to draw attention to the materials already posted on the website of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Well, we record once again that the Technical Secretariat professes double standards, destroying the nature, spirit, and meaning of the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. Look, now these standards are being taken once again, or there is a new round being taken with respect to our country, with respect to Syria. It is also clear why, because the Technical Secretariat of the OPC has recently been dominated by representatives of NATO countries, EU countries, or nominees of satellite countries. We also record such, you know, a real atmosphere of intolerance towards those who are still able to take an independent position with regard to the Convention on the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, who rely on facts. And we see that the situation in principle is getting worse day by day. This is also all a process that did not begin yesterday, not in the 22nd year. Back in the 18th year, the Euro-Atlantic allies, led by the United States, launched a campaign to squeeze Venezuela, then Syria, and Russia out of the Half Council of the OPC and the administrative bodies of the organization. And this process continues. This is openly stated by the US mediator at the OPC. Look, Nicole Champagne. She said this summer that it would be easier to make the necessary decision of the voting coalition without Russia's participation. Well, that's right. These will be just single-track solutions in the interests of only one center, and the center, which turns out to be actually in the minority if we take the entire population of the world. And despite all of the above, our country, our like-minded people, we will continue to make every possible effort to protect the integrity of the core. I'm not sure if it will be possible to restore the authority of the organization in the near future or in the medium term, but at least it's worth fighting for its functionality.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Liana Dalu is with us. Yes, hello. We have only one question today. We would like to ask you to comment on the murder of the freelance operator of the Anadolu agency Hasid Hamid in Gaza, as well as the situation with the death of journalists covering this conflict in general. You know, the situation with journalism in principle in the world is catastrophic. As for the Middle East, this is an unprecedented drama in terms of the number of journalists killed while performing their professional duty. Moreover, all this remains without any comment. I'm not saying measures or steps, just commenting on the part of relevant structures, criminally silences UNESCO. It was as if her CEO Azul had filled her mouth with water. This is a shameful phenomenon. This is a phenomenon that the international community should literally protest and distrust. Because one of the central mandates of UNESCO is related to the protection of the safety of journalists, to the protection of freedom of speech. They are allocated money to the Secretariat They hold a lot of all sorts of events, but in fact, in real life, there is an outrage against journalists outside the walls of UNESCO headquarters in Paris. I do not know the details of the death of the freelance cameraman you mentioned. I am familiar with the details of the death in the region of a huge number of journalists from different media from different countries.
Огромного числа журналистов разных средств массовой информации, разных стран.
And we express our condolences to the relatives and friends of all the journalists who died in the region over the past year. You know that we give this a principled assessment. The situation is catastrophic with ensuring the safety of journalists in the escalation zone of the Palestinian-Israeli and other regional conflicts. The situation around Ukraine is no exception. Almost no murder or attempt, capture, infliction of serious harm, threats against Russian journalists have also received proper assessments. Yes, I have not received any assessment from UNESCO, from the OSS, from the unspecialized and simply unrepresentatives. Look, people are dying every day in the Middle East region, and more than 100,000 victims of this conflict are due to the fact that for a long time, 75 years, and with the direct patronage of the West, an old problem has not been solved, and now it is also getting worse. And all this is under the banner of Western democracy, which on the one hand wants to bring to the region these very liberal values, which, as they claim, are based on freedom of speech, pluralism of opinions. And on the other hand, under their boots, and given that these are American weapons, and weapons that are not supplied to the region, not a single life of a journalist is broken, and they do not pay attention to this. In other words, they destroy their own proclaimed values by their own actions. The same applies to Ukraine, the same applies to other regions of the world, other points. It's all the same. Therefore, everyone needs to act actively. And I, by the way, here you represent Turkey. Well, in general, this is a Turkish news agency. I remember how much Ankara has suffered in recent years due to the fact that the alleged situation in this country does not meet Western standards in the field of not only human rights, but also freedom of speech. This is despite the fact that Turkey has an extensive system of mass media communication, and the country has its own traditions. The country has its own democratic transit, a process that develops simply in its own circumstances. But at the same time, journalism and journalists play a huge role in the life of Turkey, obviously, and at the same time, for some reason, the situation did not suit the West all the time. But when journalists die, the West turns away. They turn around only when it comes to the safety of their journalists. Moreover, it is also necessary to understand only those of their journalists who serve the mainstream. The rest of the journalists, even if they are Americans, as it was in Ukraine, are dying. They are being killed by the Kiev regime. This does not bother the United States of America. Well, as a matter of fact, listen to what Assange said. It seems to me that it is also very indicative. Speaking now at European institutions. So, Larudev is with us.
Yes, I am with you.
Hello.
Okay.
Yes, good afternoon. I am from Kurdistan, from Iraq. Israel has launched a ground operation in Lebanon. There is a possibility that the war will reach Syria and Iraq, if not Iran. The Iranian president will visit Russia, and he still has meetings. What will Russia do to prevent the war from spreading to other countries? And what will happen during the meetings?
Russia, in order to prevent escalation, I would like to say the settlement of the situation, but at least the escalation of the situation, before the escalation of the situation in the Middle East. And we are doing everything in our power to prevent the conflagration of a big war in the Middle East. We coordinate our efforts with regional and international partners. We have been working for a whole year, since the first days of the escalation, which was marked by a terrorist attack against Israelis. We are working with our colleagues, with our partners in the Security Council. We have proposed more than one resolution. We have worked with projectors of resolutions worn by other countries. All this was aimed at translating the situation into a political and diplomatic solution. We see how Western countries block any attempt to state the impasse of hostilities and block any talks in the Security Council about a political and diplomatic settlement. It's just that it's, as if it's a taboo topic for them, as if they can't imagine anything except continuing to supply weapons to the region.
Ничего себе представить, кроме продолжения поставок вооружений в регион.
Therefore, we are doing everything I have said with a really sincere intention to contribute to de-escalation.
Действительно искренним намерением способствовать
And all our steps and actions are aimed at this. Now, as for the negotiations at the highest level, as you know, the presidential administration comments on them here, but it is obvious that during negotiations with representatives of countries neighboring the region, and indeed at all levels. Now, the negotiations certainly always concern the situation in the Middle East. I am not going to comment in detail on the upcoming negotiations between the presidents. It's just not my competence. But I can assure you that the leadership of our country pays special attention to this topic. Because this is not a local conflict. A large number of countries are involved. The crisis has several tracks. Among other things, we are talking about arms supplies from other continents. We are talking about the efforts of the Security Council. So, of course, a large number of states are involved. And, of course, this now affects almost everyone.
My second question is that
I have a second question. Parliamentary elections will be held in Iraqi Kurdistan on the 20th of October. What can Russia say about this? Is Moscow following the elections, and has it sent a group of observers?
This is an internal matter of sovereign states holding elections on their territory. But taking into account the circumstances and nuances, I will allow myself to answer your question in an expanded way. Naturally, everyone knows that elections to the parliament of the Kursk Autonomous Region are scheduled for the third decade of this month, and taking into account the fact that they were last held in September in the 2018 year, we consider the upcoming vote a timely positive step designed to further strengthen internal political stability, both in the Kursk Autonomous Region and in Iraq as a whole. We calculate that the planned elections will be held in full compliance with both the regional legislation of Iraqi Kurdistan and federal norms, and will also allow all interested voters to exercise their legal rights.
thanks a lot. Thanks for your time and answers.
Thanks a lot for the questions. Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
The assistant to the President of the Russian Federation, Mr. Obashev, said, and reported on the meeting of the President of Russia and Iran and Kyrgyzstan on October 12th. Such topics will be discussed, and whether issues of mutual joint cooperation for countering US aggression will be touched upon.
совместного сотрудничества для противостояния агрессии США.
I have just said that we do not comment on the negotiations at the highest level. It is the prerogative of the administration. As a matter of fact, the administration has already partially commented. There will also be extended comments. I just ask you to understand our distribution of responsibilities. Thank you. Then, Baku TV is with us. Hello, Maria Vladimirovna, Sabina Dadesheva, Baku TV RU. We have one question today. American congressmen have sent a letter to the State Department calling for sanctions against Azerbaijan, and there is a feeling that the United States is increasing pressure on Azerbaijan just a month before the start of the work of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change 2024 year, actually the COP29, which will be held in Baku. And you noted the other day that the climate issue has become such a powerful tool of political manipulation. And in this regard, I would like to hear your comment on this topic in detail. Thank you, but I have the impression that American congressmen, I understand that they receive money for their international lobbying. They do not hide it, but I think there is something to do. Here I am once again. I will certainly return to the climate agenda and to the event that is taking place and will be held in Azerbaijan on this topic. But I want to say that the monstrous uncovered facts of the global, in fact, Pan-American scandal, it's about all this Hollywood get-togethers and how they have been corrupting children for decades. It says that American congressmen have something to do at home. If they view their elective positions as just a business of receiving money from international lobbyists, then, probably, it is necessary to rename all this and make not a structure called Congress, but a structure called the American Lobby, or the Lobbying Agency, or the Lobbying Agency. And it's easy to send money there and these people will work. But since congressmen are people to whom the American population delegates rights and delegates their aspirations and powers to realize their civic interests, so maybe they will deal with their problems. But after all, there are no more forces to look at what is happening there. Look, the total legalization of drugs, monstrous experiments on children of all kinds, this is endless gender manipulation. Crime is off the scale, unresolved problems with their own borders, and all the time let them dig into other people's problems. Now about the issues of climate change. Indeed, it is used by Western countries as a political lever very often. A classic US tactic every year on the eve of the next conference of the parties to the Framework Convention on Climate Change. Washington increases pressure on the chair state, especially if it is a satellite of the states. We saw this, for example, in the 22nd year before the conference of the parties in Sharm el-Sheikh. It was the same last year. This is a conference of the parties in Dubai. Now we are observing how pressure is increasing on the chairman of the conference of the parties in Azerbaijan under a far-fetched pretext. But I think it's useless to put pressure on Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan has been pressed more than once on various, so to speak, issues. And the point is that we are talking not only about the principled position of the inadmissibility of exerting pressure on a sovereign state. The point is that this topic requires the real involvement of specialists and not another political club with which the states will beat everyone on the head just to push through a profitable solution for themselves. And such stuffing is used to skillfully create a stir around the popular topic of climate. In reality, the United States and other Western countries are actually sabotaging the agreement on a new collective quantitative goal in the field of climate finance, as well as reaching consensus on the creation of an international market for carbon units. Thank you. Is it with us? I apologize. The publication For the first time, in my opinion, the author is with us. I do not know. Either it's a Roman one, or it's I, correct me. The author is with us, not with us. Okay, good. Then let's move on. Is Greater Asia with us?
Maria Vladimirovna, hello.
Yes, hello.
You have repeatedly covered the issues of energy security today. We have one question in continuation of this topic. Yesterday, on the 8th of October, the International Gas Forum started in St. Petersburg, the program of which emphasizes the relevance and scope of the broad Russian-Asian energy agenda. As we can see, a large high-ranking delegation of the Chinese National Oil and Gas Corporation is currently working on the sidelines of the event, and we know that the current gas contract between Gazprom and the largest oil and gas company in China is the largest in the world. With this in mind, how does the Russian Foreign Ministry assess the prospects for cooperation between Gazprom and the Chinese National Oil and Gas Corporation in the context of global energy security of the entire Asia-Pacific region?
Well, it seems to me that it is possible to answer briefly very well, but I think that it is unlikely that this will suit you, as well as the answer that it is possible to find relevant materials on the Gazprom website itself. I think you want something different, and I have it. As a country, we have repeatedly reaffirmed our commitment to ensuring global energy security in various historical situations, and are doing this in the interests of peaceful development of the country, constructive cooperation based on mutual respect for international law. Look, today we have indeed talked more than once about the northern streams, that despite the international terrorist attack committed against them, Russia would still be ready to resume the supply of raw materials if the relevant agreements were reached. But, in my opinion, this is an unprecedented example. There are probably no such examples. But to the direct question of the same German journalists, could it technically be done? Russia replied yes. It will take several weeks if the relevant technical documents are drawn up and a corresponding agreement is reached. Russia is a reliable supplier of energy resources, responsibly fulfills all its obligations, and is ready to build a depoliticized dialogue on a wide range of issues on the modern energy agenda with all interested states and associations. We see unprecedented pressure on this very issue. This is also external economic pressure, but it is especially focused here in the field of energy security, energy cooperation. The pressure is on the energy sector of our country and other countries. It's been going on for a long time too, simply because we provide our raw materials, goods, services qualitatively, fairly, on a mutually respectful basis. We compete fairly. We do it with dignity. And that's exactly what the states are not satisfied with, which cannot do this. But we can already see how they can. Crush, blow up, destroy, and so on. And despite this pressure on our energy sector, Russia has quickly and effectively switched the main vector of supplies, its raw materials, to new centers of global economic growth, including those located in Asia. According to the results of the 23rd year, the share of the Asia-Pacific region in Russia's energy exports exceeded 60%. We are expanding the geography and scale of energy cooperation, building new supply routes to the dynamically growing markets of southern Eurasia. The export of fatty natural gas continues to grow. Energy supplies from Russia allow friendly countries to restrain the growth of import prices, maintain competitiveness on the world market, ensure energy security, and fulfill socioeconomic tasks. Well, that's a few more numbers. In the 23rd year, Russia provided 8% of gas consumption in China and 20% of its imports, including 35% of pipeline gas imports and 11% of liquefied natural gas imports. Along with Turkmenistan, Russia is already the largest supplier of pipeline gas to China, and, together with Australia, Qatar is one of the three leading suppliers of liquefied natural gas to the Chinese market. In the 24th year, Russia will become the largest gas exporter to China, ahead of Australia, and in the 25th year, it is expected to reach the design level of 38 billion cubic meters per year of gas supplies through the power of Siberia gas pipeline, and after 2027, the contracted gas supplies along the Far Eastern route should begin. This is another 10 billion cubic meters per year for a reliable gas supply to China in the period from the 30s to the 40s. Russia is ready to further increase the supply of pipeline gas to China, based on the real needs of the Chinese market. And in this regard, the active discussion of the construction project of the Power of Siberia to gas pipeline continues. China is also one of the most promising and fast-growing markets for Russian oil, including 4 new large-capacity plants under construction and planned in the Yamalo-Nenets district, Leningrad, Murmansk region, and Khabarovsk territory. There are also opportunities and mutual interest for the active development of cooperation between Russia and China in the development and application of production technologies for a wide range of equipment for the gas industry. The use of Russia's best practices in the development of underground gas storage systems, gas trunk transport, and gas distribution networks in China. Once again, I recommend that you probably contact Gazprom with some details. There is more than, and I would say even a highly professional press service. And I think they will provide you with additional information.
Thank you.
Thank you. Less than Earl greater than is with us.
Maria Vladimirovna, the portal welcomes you. Yes, we have a question for you. Armenia recently refused to sign a statement on the principles of ensuring security in Eurasia at the CIS Foreign Ministers Summit. Well, a statement that condemns any attempts of power dictate that undermines equal cooperation in Eurasia proper. Is that why, in your opinion, Yerevan made such a decision?
You know, I want to say that the mentioned document was adopted at the meeting of the CIS-Smith on October 7th. It defines approaches to the main parameters of the formation of the architecture of equal and indivisible security of Eurasia, the settlement of existing and prevention of new conflicts, regional and so on, by the Eurasian states themselves on the basis of the principles of the UN Charter. I can say that Armenia actively participated in the expert approval of the draft statement, made proposals on the text. Many were taken into account. At the same time, the Armenian foreign minister did not sign the document at the Council of Foreign Ministers itself, and that's why he did it. I think he'd better tell you himself.
And your personal opinion can be found out.
My personal opinion on this matter will remain with me.
Okay, thank you very much for your reply.
Yes, whether Tverskaya 13 is with us.
Yes, hello, Maria Vladimirovna. We have one question. Could you comment on the call and Stoltenberg addressed the President of Ukraine after his resignation from the post of NATO Secretary General on the example of the end of the war in the USSR, which then implies 10% of Ukrainian territories, for the possibility of preserving an independent state. The question is just such a global change in his policy after he, well, left the post of Secretary General, right? How he shouted that war should only be on the battlefield. And now he offers Ukraine to give up part of the territories to end the conflict. Sort of.
Yes, you know, I said this at the beginning. You understand, it would have been possible to analyze it from a realistic point of view if he had said this while serving as NATO Secretary General, but he said it after resigning, respectively, from this post. Accordingly, this has some kind of propaganda purpose. What is she like? Well, a statement, as I have already said, of the situation on the battlefield as formulated by the Westerners themselves. Among other things, as we have repeatedly said, flirting with the topic of NATO and Ukraine's accession to the North Atlantic Alliance is linked to the interests of a number of NATO countries. On the partition of Ukraine, Poland obviously has these interests, and other countries have these interests, which are just waiting for Zelensky to finish off the population of Ukraine, and they can already move on to gnawing it. Therefore, I would also link this percentage voiced with the bloodthirsty views of the NATO countries, which have their own understanding of what the border of Ukraine should look like, and not with Russia in the first place, but with their own members.
Понимание того, как должна выглядеть граница Украины, и отнюдь не с Россией в первую очередь, а с их собственными членами.
Well, once again, I commented on this issue in detail in the introductory part, but in addition to it, I would also suggest keeping in mind that a number of NATO states have their own idea of which part of Ukraine should belong to which of them. Well, if in Poland there are even some there, I don't know. The Polish territory was printed on the money, which includes the Ukrainian territory right now. Moreover, it was absolutely not in order to revive some historical facts, but in order to form ambitions among the younger generation and form a clear understanding of what should belong to Poland. And this is how I am still tangentially right now. In fact, similar statements were made there from political figures, and in general we have relevant information.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, is the voice of the fatherland with us?
Yes, hello, Maria Vladimirovna. We have one question today. It was noted that the Moscow Declaration on the Protection of the Interests of Multinational States of 1994 is a legally non-binding document. Does this mean that we can now aim our nuclear missiles at the decision-making center, that is, create a threat to the United States at any moment, given that the concept of a retaliatory strike has been removed from the nuclear doctrine?
I always want to ask you a question, but why is the foreign ministry so lucky, and you come to us with military political issues and topics? We are always glad to see you, and always respond to you, but this is still the specialization of our respective departments that deal with defense, strategic planning, and so on and so forth. That's probably the question I have.
Probably. A more open department, and it is easier to build communications with you.
Well, I think that the opportunity will hear you now and intercept you from us. But you always contact us. We will always answer from our corner. It's just that your questions are much broader than our competence in this case. We see no legal or political grounds to link Russia's steps to strengthen its own defense capability with the legal nature of the bilateral Russian-Indian Declaration. The Moscow Declaration, let me remind you, is about protecting the interests of multinational states. It was signed in Moscow back in the 94th year, following the visit of the Prime Minister of India to Russia, reflected the existing level of relations between the two countries at that time, and it should be understood that documents of this kind, which are not qualified as legally binding, often confirm the international legal obligations already existing between the parties and the status quo existing in relation to them. In other words, commitment to the universally recognized principles and norms of international law, friendly and mutually beneficial nature of cooperation. Now, as for the question of targeting or not targeting Russian nuclear missiles, we have repeatedly, received such questions, and we have repeatedly given explanations regarding this plot. The joint statements made by the nuclear powers in various formats over the years about not targeting nuclear weapons at each other and at third countries were an element of systematic work to reduce nuclear danger. These steps were positively perceived by the international community as a practical contribution to strengthening international security and strategic stability. Russian approaches to this topic are described in more detail In our specialized report on the relevance of the decisions taken by Russia, Britain, and the United States on the non-targeting of strategic nuclear missiles. This is the 11th of August of the 23rd year. It is posted on the website. Indeed, we record that at the moment, as a result of the destructive policy of the West, whose actions are capable of leading to a direct military clash of nuclear powers, the level of nuclear danger has seriously increased. We clearly warn about this both the United States and other NATO members who follow the American format, and instead of following thoughtlessly American courses, it is necessary to come to your senses and fully realize the disastrous consequences that their provocative and extremely dangerous line is fraught with. As for the Russian military planning documents, the issues of reliability and effectiveness of nuclear deterrence are reflected, it seems to me, in an exhaustive way. Again, exhaustive comments on this issue were given by the President of the Russian Federation during the open part of the meeting of the Permanent Meeting of the Security Council of the Russian Federation on Nuclear Deterrence on September 25th of this year. All this has been done to ensure the fundamental interests of the national security of our country.
Thank you very much, Marina.
Thank you. I wanted to clarify, do we have any more questions? Yes. There is still a post for Moscow. Oh yes, sorry, I missed it. Yes, of course. And we have just one question. Is it true that Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan, through diplomatic channels, express their dissatisfaction with Russia's policy towards citizens of these countries, in particular with the tightening of migration legislation? Could this lead to a cooling of relations with Russia and the replacement of Russia's role in Central Asia by China, Turkey, and the United States? But I would say that political figures, even officials of these countries, also publicly express their assessments of the policy, the migration legislation that is in force or being developed or discussed in our country, in the context of the fact that citizens of these countries work in Russia, come, are migrants, and so on.
Что граждане упомянутых стран работают в России, приезжают, являются мигрантами и так далее.
Therefore, there is no need to look for any hidden agenda here. It is quite open to itself. In other words, there are even public statements in this regard. As for diplomatic channels, they exist in order for these issues, which are designated as problematic, to be resolved, removed. Various kinds of explanations are given, information is clarified, the position of a particular country is taken into account. This process is being actively carried out in our country precisely to reconcile the position, to resolve complex issues, and prevent them from escalating into problematic issues. Now, as you know, work is underway to streamline the migration flows of Russia. First of all, we are talking about friendly cis-member states that enjoy visa-free regime. I think it is also clear what the task is, but I repeat, to nullify the illegal shadow side of this process. I think that every state in which there are migration phenomena, so to speak, knows what it is. These are always issues that are not very simple, but require resolution so that, again, they do not escalate into big problems. Our partners are no less interested than we are in restoring clear rules, according to which migrant workers staying with us will be able not only to work on understandable and legal grounds, but also to receive all the necessary social protection and legal assistance if necessary. This work is being carried out openly through the relevant departments, such as the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the Ministry of Labor, partly, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia. Also, in the course of interparliamentary contacts, this topic is discussed with our foreign partners, and the whole complex is discussed, not just some positive nuances, but the whole complex. We speak very frankly. In this regard, we can say that the topic of labor migration really occupies an important place on the agenda of our relations with these countries. We are making the necessary efforts to preserve and strengthen the long-standing friendly, strategic, and allied ties that bind us, and we are convinced that our partners also fully understand the exceptional importance of such relations with Moscow, including in their own interests. But it is very important here, really, it seems to me that we need to somehow accept this as an imperative, to proceed from this as from such a basic concept. Are these questions in the public sphere? Well, I'm not talking about diplomats at all. Such an attitude always dominates there. But in the public sphere, it is certainly necessary to proceed from a mutually respectful discussion of such topics. In no case should they be discussed in such a way as to incite intraethnic, interreligious hatred. And in general, so at least some disrespect, or, so to speak, provoke some conflicts. By no means. Here it is always necessary to proceed from, in my opinion, including applying the thesis, the postulate that doctors are guided by, do no harm. Every word, every phrase, participation in debates, defending one's position should proceed and should be built. Proceed and build from this thesis. It is possible to do harm in such a way, even in a word, that then it will be difficult, so to speak. Not that it is difficult to solve global issues, but even it is difficult to deal with this new problem. It may turn out that way. Therefore, it is always necessary to restrain emotions, whatever they may be, and proceed from the interests of people, proceed from the interests of stable, peaceful relations, both at the interstate level and at the level of simple human contacts and connections. And in no case should we give fertile soil to the slightest manifestations of some kind of xenophobia, and so on. So, do we have any more questions?
Yes, Maria Vladimirovna, can I ask one?
Come on, yes.
And can I personally find out your opinion about the quadrober movement that came from the ocean, well, more precisely from Japan? But do you think that it can be dangerous for children?
Well, it seems to me that our people have encountered the phenomenon of quadrobers even before. It seems to me that the fairy tales about not drinking from a puddle, you will turn into a goat, indicated this problem, so to speak, in previous years too. Therefore, everything happened in life, and all sorts of problems in general, had various manifestations. But it seems to me, since I was asked my personal opinion, and we are still apparently talking about the fact that to a greater extent, or the most acute discussions concern children, perhaps this is a manifestation that is associated with the lack of attention necessary for the child.
Возможно, это проявление, которое связано с отсутствием необходимого ребенку внимания.
Maybe in this way he is trying to signal to his parents, relatives in the family, that he needs their care, love. He needs it, maybe he doesn't get it. I don't want to go into the depths of all the specific phenomena that have arisen in the West now. As you know, we pay special attention to this, because these are all destructive phenomena, including this one. I don't even want to laugh it off, but it seems to me that as soon as these phenomena exist, and as soon as they concern our lives, the way out can be increased attention and boundless love for children, which will allow them not to draw attention to their own problems in this way. For some reason, it seems to me that if children are getting involved in all this, it's because they don't have enough adult attention.
But, unfortunately, very often children show aggression. Well, here's an example of a mother with many children. I have 4 children, and my youngest son recently ran into me on the playground. He is 6 years old. A 14-year-old girl came up to Robert, kicked him in the face. Just like that. She was pretending to be a cat. But there are some who just walk around, here they are playing, tumbling. But it's harmless from the point of view.
No, no, no. These are not harmless things at all. They're like me. As I have already said, they have historically manifested themselves in different ways, but also in these contexts. Well, I say it again. And all this is described in one way or another in scientific and fiction literature. We just used to think that these were some myths, fairy tales, that this was all some kind of oral folk art. Now we see that these manifestations are even at a new technological level, but they are comparable to what was written in some legends, epics, and so on. Everything is the same, only with a new technological wrapper. And these are by no means harmless things. This is not just some kind of game. This is an indicator that a child needs the attention of parents, society, and schools, sometimes kindergarten, sometimes probably universities as well. Although the child may be an adult, but he may have the same problems as a minor child. Therefore, but there is a theme, and we see it. How?
At the state level, there are no conversations with children about what is good and what is bad, either in kindergartens or in schools. But there are certain standards. That is, we do not have such a thing now. I have 4 of them, yes, and they are all different ages. In other words, no one explains that this is not good. That is, as it were, well in children. In other words, it is clear that this is imposed on us, on the parents. But nevertheless a terrible curtain. Well, it becomes very simple.
I absolutely agree with you that this topic should be raised, because I say again that it is already linked to other topics in the West, including this so-called gender madness. We should already call a spade, not diversity, gender insanity. These are also elements of a person's self-identification. A person has already been told in the West that he will call himself who. It does not matter whether it concerns gender, or concerns self-determination in principle, that he will be, and to the questions, by the way, of the American congressman mentioned more than once today, to various activists of this movement, and how to understand who a person really is. The activists replied that it was up to the person himself to self-determine. To the question, what if he self-identifies several times a day? Well, that's fine. Therefore, it is all linked into one system of changing true values and replacing them with false values, anti-values. Thank you very much. The topic, I believe, is not an idle one, and it seems to me that it is worth paying attention in the context of the fact that often the madness of perversion, which is presented under the guise of certain values or a new normality by those who call themselves liberal Democrats, I say again, is actually a substitution of true values and false ones.
Либеральными демократами, еще раз говорю, на самом деле является подменой истинных ценностей и ложными.
Thank you very much. Until our next briefing and meeting. Well-being.
Thank you.
Yes.